in the season, Titans were known as the underdogs. In conference, they have fought through that label and made themselves known as a competitive ball club. Welcome to Inside the Basket. I'm your host, Jasmine Arenas, alongside basketball beat reporter for the Daily Titan, Harrison Fagan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming out. And of course, you've probably seen his face at the games, Titan Sports beat reporter, Christian Vigil.
Well, I clearly have no life, but you know what? I do like covering these games, so I think it's a pretty good substitute.
Hey, they like you out there,
Welcome, Harrison.
right?
What was it?
They like you out there, right?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do. I'm pretty sure the players and coach like me. I mean, we talk and stuff, so.
Probably don't. It's okay, though. I'm just kidding.
But hey, I mean.
I can't blame them.
Yeah.
There's a different level of resilience with this group. They trust each other. Their confidence in themselves and their confidence in each other is really starting to play out on the floor. And no matter what type of game is going on, these guys are bought into being able to play that game. And most importantly, they've been able to execute it down the stretch.
Titan Hoops. Yes, the ball club is slowly turning around, but first, consistency. So I've got to ask, what has contributed to the team's inconsistency?
Well, when you say consistency, I think the thing that they've been most consistent at is turning the ball over, which obviously isn't a great thing. They turn it over 23.6% of the time, according to Ken Palm, which is 3% more just about than the next closest team in the conference. And anytime you're turning the ball over on almost a quarter of your possessions, that's not really a great stat.
Well, he's the analytics guy, but I'm just going to think big picture here. To come off of those turnovers, just their success or lack thereof on the road is something that I think is probably more big picture, especially since most of the time they're pretty much in it, with these games, no matter who they're playing. And they just have these mental lapses down the stretch, or maybe even in games where they just dig themselves in a hole where they're down by 12 or 13 and they kind of have to fight their way back. And turnovers contribute to that. And
yeah, it's harder to fight your way back when you're giving the ball away because you have to basically be perfect on every single possession. And
Exactly.
if you're giving the ball back to the other team, giving them extra chances to score, then that's not really going to help you.
Yep.
Obviously, but a decrease in turnovers is an example of success. Given the victory versus Long Beach, where both teams actually had 16 turnovers. How can the Titans decrease the amount of turnovers in order to be successful in the remainder of the season?
Just move the basketball, move with purpose, and try not to have those mental lapses where you're kind of forcing the issue. Surprisingly, Jackson Rowe, who has been outstanding this season, he's been turning the ball over a lot, which is pretty incredible when you think about his position that he's playing. He's playing the 4 spot, sometimes the 5, but he turns the ball over a lot. But, they just have to find a way to move the basketball without really forcing the issue.
Yeah, and I think some of that just comes from being a young player. He's a freshman this year, and he's contributed a lot, but young players make mental mistakes, and he probably hasn't seen traps like this and defenses like this before. So he's still learning, I think, where to pass the ball and what to do when he gets a lot of pressure.
What does it take to mentally prepare for these type of games or even on the road? Because their on-the-road schedule has been difficult compared to home games.
Well, I know Coach Taylor, we talked about this earlier this season for a story that I did for the Daily Titan, and he's not like a big rah-rah, pump-up-the-guys, Hoosiers type speech guy, but they do have mental coaches that they actually work with to help the team work on their mindset and work on if they need to be pumped up going into a game, getting them to that mindset, or if they need to calm down and kind of get to like more zen mental space, then they can do that as well, and they have people mental coaches that they work with for that.
Well, I don't know too much about the mental preparation, but I think a lot of the time, people don't really think about this, but they're also student athletes. So, they have to take care of their academics and stuff. So there's some stresses outside of, these games, especially since the majority of the road losses kind of came in December. Finals, pretty stressful time. So, I've taken a sports psychology class, and it was very interesting to take that class. And she's talked about how she's worked with some of the, basketball teams, not just the basketball team, but just all other aspects of sports, like the baseball team, the softball team, et cetera, et cetera. So, it's so far they're doing a pretty good job, at least with the success they've had at home. But on the road, it's a different issue.
I know, right? It's crazy to think that there's life after basketball. Come on now. What? Okay, so moving on to the next question. I know you touched on it a little bit. Who is a standout player this season, according to you and your stats and everything you've done reporting this season?
Well, I know I've mentioned Jackson Rowe, but I'm going to go with Lionheart Leslie, who's been absolutely outstanding in the absence of Khalil Ahmad, which is great. He's been taking some of the scoring pressure off of Trey Coggins, which is what you want out of your primary scorer. And especially since he's had, games where he's had 20-plus points consecutively, and he'll have like big offensive plays where he's making and ones, getting to the basket, making big plays to help energize the crowd when they're at home. So he's really done a great job kind of carrying the load in the absence of Khalil Ahmad.
Definitely a guy who lives up to his name. Harrison.
For me, it's been, I talked about him a little bit already, but it's definitely been Rowe. I think when you're talking about a freshman coming in and making an impact like he has and being in the team's most frequently used lineups as either the 4 or the 5, he's versatile. He can play multiple positions, defend multiple positions. I think he's leading the Big West in field goal percentage as of right now. So it's like he's a guy that knows his, and that's even despite that he's kind of moved out to the 3-point arc a little bit, which can sometimes hurt your field goal percentage. A lot of the time, the guys that are leading in that are just the kind of like dunkers, basically, is all they do, and he's really good at that. He showed it off a couple times this season, but he can also shoot a little bit, and he's just been incredibly versatile, and I think making more of an impact than I would imagine than even they even expected.
It's good just having a freshman who is as strong as Rowe, because next year they won't have the players like Trey Coggins. Trey Coggins has made a great impact here at Cal State Fullerton, leading the Big West in points. Do you guys have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, he's doing what he's kind of always done, right, which is score the ball really well. He's using up a ton of possessions for Cal State Fullerton. He can do so relatively efficiently. His shot has really started to come on lately from 3-point range. He was really good against Long Beach from there, and I just, that's kind of what they expect from him. I think every time that we ask Coach Taylor after the game, what did you see from Trey tonight, he just kind of says the same thing I always see, and it's what they expect from him at this point, even if he's playing really, really well.
Trey, give me Treys.
Well,
Please.
Speaking of Treys, I mean, like he said, he's been shooting lights out, especially against the conference. He's shooting, I believe, 46% from beyond the arc. So even though he does take some questionable shots from that range, they do go in kind of for the most part. So, and like he said, he's been playing his game. He's a very talented scorer in his own right, leading the Big West, like you said, and yeah, he's just doing his thing out there.
How important is it having Khalil Ahmad back on the lineup?
Well, it's almost like making a mid-season acquisition, right? Because he was out for the whole fall semester with academic ineligibility. And so if you can add somebody who is the second leading scorer on your team mid-season, your team's going to get a lot better. And I think that they're starting to kind of integrate him back into the lineup. They're getting used to having him back out there. I think he's starting to hit his stride individually. Scored 19 of his 23 points against Long Beach in the second half. Was just like shooting the lights out from distance. And yeah, I think he's finally hitting his stride.
Yeah, I mean, to go off of that, I mean, like I said about Lionheart Leslie, he's done a great job taking some of the scoring load off of Trey, and now you actually get a talented scorer. Like he said, it's almost like a mid-season acquisition. So it's wonderful to see that, and especially since I asked him about it, is he hitting his stride at this point in the season? And he has nothing but praise for his teammates getting him open looks and knocking those shots down.
We're stealing your words. We're stealing your words.
It's not stealing, it's borrowing.
Yeah,
Acquisition.
He's recycling.
Okay, recycling. It's good for the environment.
You're supposed to disagree, but you're agreeing, so it's okay.
Well, can't disagree with the facts.
Okay.
Yeah, he has excellent opinions. It's hard to argue.
Yeah. I mean, he's been learning a lot watching some of the shows. So.
You guys kind of touched on this. Don't sleep on Khalil, right?
Yeah.
Is that where we're going with this?
Yeah, I just think that he was out for the whole fall semester. And so even though I believe he was practicing with the team, he was with the team on the bench, so like he's watching the games, but it's hard to devote a ton of practice time to playing with a guy that isn't going to be able to play in those games. So I think that now that he's back in the lineup, they're kind of gaining chemistry with him again. They're figuring out maybe where he likes the ball, what spots he's going to be going to on the floor, and it's just a matter of kind of getting that nonverbal communication and that team chemistry going.
Absolutely, especially since he's on the floor, he's another threat. So double teams, aren't coming as often as they should, especially when you have Trey on the floor. So like I said, and like he said, he's finding his groove. Not to mention that Lionheart Leslie, like I said, he's had outstanding scoring games at the beginning of the year, and he's actually had a couple good scoring games too. He's averaging double digits in scoring. So a lot of, I think now at this point that they're playing their best basketball. If you notice the schedule and the way they've played, they lost 3 straight, but since then they're 3-1, and that one loss came at UC Davis, which is obviously a tough task when you're facing the #1 seed in the Big West.
And they almost won that game. They were in it down the stretch.
Exactly, and like I said, and we've always said this about this team, they're very competitive, and now they're finally getting into a groove and playing arguably their best basketball.
Well, going into March in a couple of weeks, do you think the Titans have created a culture where they can now be as competitive as other teams in the Big West? You guys kind of answered this, but more in depth.
Yeah, I just think that they're literally competitive. They're 500, so it means that they could basically win any game, they could lose any game. And I think that the fact that they're still healthy, the fact that they're just getting Ahmad comfortable back in the lineup, I think that that kind of gives them a higher upside than you would typically see from a team at this point in the season.
Yeah, if I had to make a comparison at the professional level, they kind of remind me of the baby Lakers from the standpoint of they have young talent. I mean, yes, it's going to be bad for the program that Trey Coggins he's a senior, he's going to graduate. But
I'm just trying to Kobe.
Well, it's not like it's a Trey Coggins farewell tour. I mean, they're actually winning ball games unlike last year. But nonetheless, you do have a fluctuation of freshmen coming in, and then you have like a lot of young talent, like we've talked about Jackson Rowe. Khalil Mahd's only a sophomore, so if they stick around, they can develop the talent that they have. I mean, the future is looking bright for this program.
Is there anyone on the roster now that you guys wish you guys would have seen more, or wish that you guys see more for the remainder of the season?
Maybe not seen more, but more so played better. Darcy Malone, I had high expectations for the guy simply because he's a 7-footer, and from what I heard, he can shoot from beyond the arc. He hasn't been attempting as many, so I'm going to say that he hasn't been shooting it bad. He just hasn't been shooting enough. So I would like to see a little more aggressiveness coming out of Darcy Malone. He does play a little bit physical. I mean, I know he's a little undersized with some of his matchups because he is tall, but he is also kind of slim. But if he can just find a way to be more aggressive and hit the 3-ball, he could be a really big threat on the floor for that squad.
There's not really anyone in particular that I want to see more of. I actually think that they're starting to find the right lineups now. Earlier in the year, I think that they were experimenting a lot. There were a lot of different things that they threw it at the wall to see what would stick, and they're starting to see what's sticking now. There's a lot more Rowe at the 5. He's playing center more, which it kind of makes them really speedy. They can get out in transition, and then at times when they're playing a bigger player, then they have bigger bodies that they can throw out there too. But it seems like they're starting to find their best lineups.
And that sounds just about right. Any last thoughts before we move on to women's basketball?
Well, just the fact that, tonight they play against UC Riverside. So they have to win that road game. And then the next 2 games will be at UC Davis, at UC Irvine. So from here on out, very competitive games. But, they're playing their best basketball right now. So let's see what they're I think this is probably the biggest test for them in the regular season. See what they're capable of.
Yeah, I think they basically have to finish strong, I think.
Now moving on to women's basketball, Darren Park and the Titans are still struggling offensively, but what are some positives you can take from the season thus far?
Well, from here on out, if they lose every game, they'll still make strides compared to last season.
Yeah, they still have a better record than last year.
They'll have a way better record. Look, we try to make things, positive for these types of situations, but, we knew at the beginning of the year that they were outmanned or outwomened, I should say. They didn't have enough players on the roster, and you lose a player like Michelle Berry last year, and
explosive.
Yeah, very explosive player, pretty much a double-double machine.
Yeah.
Iman Lathan's been fantastic, but this team has just been struggling, especially on offense. So certainly, if you can finish competitive, that doesn't. I don't want to put like a number on the amount of games they should win, or they should win from here on out, but. If they can just come out, it's basketball. It's a sport. Just come out, have fun, play the game, have a good time out there on the court with your teammates, and just look forward to a fresh start for next year.
Iman Lathan, on the subject of Iman Lathan, on the Daily Titan newspaper, there was an article, probably you wrote it. Yes. No, you did write it.
Yes, I did.
That she is frustrated in most of these games. Can you talk about her frustration and where it's coming from?
I think it's kind of easy to see why you'd be frustrated. I mean, she was leading the conference in scoring. She's dropped to 4th as of the time of this recording. But I mean, just when you're losing that badly and your team's playing that poorly, and it's not like she's been perfect either, but I think that anyone as a competitor, I think all the players are probably frustrated at times, but, you know, she showed it a little bit with her body language, and she was sat a couple games ago for it, and then was out for a couple games, just completely out of the lineup, and so now she's back. She started a couple games, but I think it's frustrating for the team. I would imagine that they put a lot of work in, they practice every single day, and then when you go out and you're losing, I think it's kind of human nature to get frustrated with that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, obviously. And let's move on to the breakout star so far this season.
Well, I mean, the obvious choice would have to be Iman Lathan. But if I had to go with some other player outside of Iman Lathan, I would have to go with Jade Vega. I mean, she's leading the team in assists. She's probably their best three-point shooter, so that's always good to see. But, you know, she's having a pretty good season. She's been very competitive. You know, she's kind of like a scrappy player out there. But, yeah.
She's also very mature.
Yeah, she's well-spoken. You and I spoke with her at practice a little while ago, and she immediately, you know, if you ask her about her three-point shooting, which she leads the team in, she immediately credits her teammates for setting her up for open shots, and I think you would imagine that that's someone that's a steadying presence, at least for a team, even amidst kind of all this turmoil.
Yeah, exactly. The team may not be winning, but Jade Vega shines through it all. All right, guys, well, that does it for Inside the Basket. I'm Jasmine Arenas.
And I'm Christian Vigil.
And I'm Harrison Fagan.
Make sure you keep those tusks up, and we'll see you next time.